And here we talk about our yearning and desire for the restoration of Malchus David's kingdomship. And we talk about it in terms of a tzmicha, sprouting forth. We talk about it in terms of a restoration and an uplifting of a horn. And we talk about it in terms of a salvation. Three concepts that are all somewhat distant from our mindset, all somewhat a little strange. But let's read the words of the bracha that we say 3 times a day. And let's see if we can dig a little bit deeper so we can have some more intent, meaningful intent when we say these words. Es Zemach David Avdecha. The Zemach David. David, as we know, the Pasuk in Zechariah tells us that King David is called a Zemach, a tzmicha. He sprouts from beneath the soil. It is something that is there in its germinated form, and it will sprout forth. And so too, the Moshiach, that will be a sign of King David, is called an ish tzemach, a person who is tzemach. And we talk about the Pasuk of Tehillim also talks about the tzmicha of David. It's a slow tzmicha. Es Zemach David, the sprouting forth of David, Avdecha, your servant, Mehera, speedily, Tatzmiach, let it sprout forth. Accelerate the process. For as we know, the Moshiach can come in one of 2 ways. The Pasuk tells us, Be'itoi achishena. There is a possibility of achishena, of him coming speedily before his time. And then there is a time where he has to come. Be'itoi. This is the time. And so we ask Hashem to accelerate the process, not to wait till the very end and the final moment where he has to come, but just like in Mitzrayim. The Jewish people were supposed to be enslaved for 400 years, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu chishev es haketz. He employed various stratagems to bring the Jewish people out early. So too, the tzmicha of David, the sprouting of King David, which is a process, just like a seed is put in the ground, it disintegrates, it's dark, it looks like there is no hope and salvation, but nevertheless, beneath the surface, in the darkness of exile, the seed of David is germinating, and it'll soon sprout forth. Let it be. And furthermore, then the karnoi and his horn, Torum, you should lift up, Bishua Secha, in your salvation. The purpose of King David's arrival and the era of the Moshiach is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name should be taken out from the dust, from the mud where it is solid, where religion today is a dirty word in society at large. And therefore there is an element of Yeshua for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kavod, where everybody will see and recognize that Hashem Yimloich La'olam Voed, that is Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. So therefore we ask the Karnoi and his horn Torum, lift up Bishua Secha, in your Yeshua. And it is mentioned in the form of a horn. We look at a horn. All the kings were anointed through the medium of a horn. Oil was placed in the horn. It could be someone's at the door. The oil was placed in a horn. It's okay. And oil was placed in a horn, and it was there, and the Melech was thereby anointed. Why was he anointed? Through the medium of a keren, a horn. We talked last week about the karenos of the Mizbech Hazav, how the Pasuk tells us that on Yom Kippur, the atonement was received by the Jewish people by the medium of the sprinkling of the blood on the horns of the Mizbech, the karnei, the corner. And we talked about how a corner really conceals its 2 dimensions that are coming together, and one cannot see around the corner. And so too, a keren, a horn, bonds and combines 2 distinct entities that are opposite in sorts. You look at the horn, on the top it's very wide. On the bottom it has a tiny little funnel, very, very small little spout. And the king was anointed by the means of the oil that flowed through the horn and onto his forehead, onto his soul, that his soul should provide a medium, a funnel, whereby all the heavenly energies will be concentrated and flow to him, and thereby be revealed and manifested in this world. The Keren of David brought together heaven and earth, two opposites, two seemingly incompatible concepts. The Beis Hamikdash brought together two concepts that were incompatible. You see, we know that everything in this world has what we call a mamutza. When we have two concepts that are entirely different on a different plane, we always have something that bridges, that assumes the properties of both. We have for instance, between the domim and the somech, the inanimate objects and the live objects, we have certain entities that exhibit characteristics of being inanimate, and yet they have some characteristics of life. So too between the tzomech and the chai. So too between the chai and the medaber. You have a monkey that is part animal, part manly. There is always what we call a link, an essential link, that allows for the chain to connect between two opposites and bring it together. The Beis Hamikdash is the tzavar, it's the neck. Kemigdal David tzavarech. This is the mutzah that connects heaven and earth. There's a link the Beis Hamikdash connects them to. So too a king connects heaven and earth. He's transformed from an ordinary mortal to one who is bringing heaven down to earth and connecting the Jewish people to God, bringing them closer to God. And therefore the medium through which he's anointed is through a horn, which is wide at the top, short at the bottom. See, when you want to pour gasoline into a 5-gallon container, into a limited container, and it's coming from a tanker, the only way you could do it is through a funnel. Because here you're taking from something that is entirely different and you're constricting it into something that's very small. You want to create that connection. So too the horn connects through the medium of oil, as we talked about, oil being that physical entity that carries within it the property to be ignited, to bring out its inner light and inner goodness. So we say, V'karnoi, and his horn, Torum, lift up, Bishua Secha, in your Yeshua. Lift it up that it should connect him to the upper world. So first, make sure that his entity, it sprouts, it comes forth, the tzmicha of David should be brought out, that his horn should be lifted up in your Yeshua. And then there's a third ingredient that we have to introduce over here in order for this to happen. We have to long and yearn for his arrival. Because if we don't long, then nothing's going to happen. What's going to bring about the Moshiach's arrival is our desire and yearning for it. Ki lishuascha, for your Yeshua, for kivinu. We're makava, we hope, and we pine, and we yearn. Kol hayom, all the day, all day long. Blessed are you, Hashem, and we bring in all three elements. Matzmiach, he sprouts forth. Keren, the horn. Yeshua, of salvation. Now, we say these words, they sound a little poetic, they sound a little distant from our mindset. We run through the words. It's hard for us to even begin to have a concept of the Yom Mashiach. But we have to yearn and desire for Mashiach's arrival. Let me share with you first the concept of tatzmiach, the concept of tzmicha, of tzemach. There was a boy in Osmech, Yerushalayim, many years ago. This goes back about 30 years. There was a boy that he came from a Russian background. His parents lived on a kibbutz, a very secular kibbutz. They came from Russia in the 70s, and he grew up in a very secular kibbutz in the north of Israel. And somehow or other he was drawn close to Yiddishkeit. He came to us in Yerushalayim, and he started learning, became a great master. He had a brilliant mind. He made a siyum on the whole of Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. And when he made this siyum, the Rosh Yeshiva and the Talmidim all gathered together for the siyum. Before the siyum, the boy came to his Rosh Yeshiva in Orsmech and asked him, should I invite my father? He's very apathetic. He's very agnostic. He doesn't believe in religion. He thinks I'm crazy studying Torah here in Jerusalem. And he probably won't come. And the Rosh Yeshiva said, it doesn't matter. Even if he won't come, you tell him about your accomplishment, your achievement, and invite him to come. And it so happened he must have taken the bus from the kibbutz. He came down, his son's inviting him. He sat there at the siyum, at the head of the table, stony-faced, completely distant from everything that was happening. And the various Rosh Yeshivas spoke, and they waxed and glowed about this beautiful student, and he himself spoke. It was a beautiful Mesiba. And the fellow sat there completely distant, like in a different world. As they were about to conclude the meal, he asked to say a few words. And he stood up. And he said, my friends, I want you to know that I was imprisoned in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was still standing very strong. He said, I was imprisoned in the Soviet Union for an extended period of time. I was a political dissident. I was an agitator. And in prison, I was together with another dissident in the cell. We played chess together. We got to know one another. We talked about the great Russian writers, and we had some nice discussions together. He was a very brilliant fellow, a philosopher that was ahead of his time. He was too progressive for the Soviets. They threw him in prison to shut him up. And when I was finally released, there was political pressure being placed by the Americans for dissidents and refuseniks, and I was able to get out of prison. Right before I left, this fellow told me a story. And he said to me, there was once, this story is something, he said to me, you're not going to understand it now, but one day you'll understand it. And then you'll remember me. He said there was a village, a beautiful village, where the people in that village were wise and good-hearted, wonderful people. And they would congregate every day in the village square, in the center of the village, that was marked by the most incredible, beautiful tree. And around the tree they planted a little garden, and they put benches. And every day everybody would congregate in the shade of this gorgeous tree. It was so beautiful. Had wondrous branches and beautiful fruit and buds, and blossomed, constantly blossomed with different beautiful buds. And one of the wisest and eldest sages of the village said to everybody else one day, he said, look, we have this gorgeous tree. It's so beautiful. What's beneath the tree in the ground? What's making it grow? Roots. And what are the roots like? They're ugly roots. Look at them. Some of them were sticking out underneath the ground right by their feet. They're just dirty, ugly roots. Can you imagine if we took this tree and we turned it upside down and we put the beautiful branches and twigs beneath the ground? Can you imagine what would grow forth on the top of the tree? It would be absolutely amazing. And so these wise men, listening to their elder, they said, okay, that sounds like a very good idea. And everyone got together and they uprooted this gorgeous tree. And they dug a big pit and they stuck it in the ground and they covered it in soil, and these ugly roots were protruding. And they were hoping and waiting that something amazing is going to emerge, but of course nothing emerged. It shriveled up and the whole tree was dead. To the sadness and dismay of all the villagers, there was no tree. Many years later, there was, the elders would still congregate there and try and come together and reminisce about the old times in the city square, in the town square. And someone noticed a little sapling coming out from the tree, from the stump, the ugly stump that was left. And this sapling started to grow. And it looked in miniature form exactly like that tree, the original tree. And he said, I remember when I was a little boy, I remember the elders getting together around this tree. It was the most magnificent, glorious tree you can imagine. It was so grand. And now it's been dead so many years, but here I see a little sapling. It looks exactly like it was. And that was the story that this father was told in prison. He said, I never understood the story. But now I'm beginning to understand it. Of course, this philosopher was talking about the beginnings of the Russian Revolution, where everybody was so wise and they thought they'll turn the world upside down and make a socialist, idealistic entity and everything's going to be great. But of course, nothing happened. But with time, with the passage of time, slowly but surely, the world turns around. That was his concept. But he said, now I understand. He said, I'm looking here. I really understand it. I thought that I was so smart and I was a crusader for the truth. And I'm a progressive, I was a Marxist. I turned everything about from my grandparents. My parents spoke Yiddish. They studied, they kept the Shabbos, and I thought I'm going to be so smart. And he turned everything upside down. But here I see a little root sprouting forth. And finally, I realize everything is coming full circle. Everything is coming back. In a macro sense, Klal Yisrael were living in Eretz Yisrael, ish tachas gafnoi v'ish tachas te'enoi, each man underneath his vine and his fig tree. And it was the most beautiful, beautiful, idyllic existence. It was idyllic. We had a Beis HaMikdash. We were there in Hashem's shade. We studied his Torah. And then we thought we'll be a little smarter. And we allowed the influences of the world at large to infiltrate and to turn us around, to change our minds, and we turned everything upside down. We're banished from our land. We're unrecognizable. There's nothing but a tree stump. But beneath the ground, something is happening. Something is happening. Just like when the Jews were in Egypt, they were unrecognizable. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu beneath the surface was hearing their groans and their cries and was turning the wheels towards their ultimate redemption. So too, we understand the Geula is at Tzmicha. It's going to sprout forth anew and germinate from the seeds that are there from Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov that our forefathers planted for us. And it will be regenerated. And what we're asking Hashem is, we know that this is going to happen. Let it happen faster. Let it accelerate. Because we yearn. We can't wait. We don't like it here. We're unhappy. See, while we're comfortable here, if we don't want the Mehera, if we don't add that element of, please, bring it now, then we're missing something very essential. We're comfortable here. And if we're comfortable here, there is no ability to help it sprout. It sprouts through our yearning and desire, our fiery passion that Hashem should rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Ki ata Hashem, the Pasuk says, because you Hashem be'esh hitzata, you destroyed the Beis HaMikdash in fire. Or be'esh, and in fire ata osid livnoisa, you will ultimately rebuild it. And the commentaries tell us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the Beis HaMikdash because there was a passion and a fire for us to serve idol worship, to do things that distance his presence. But it will be rebuilt with the fire and passion of desire and yearning to be restored back to Hashem's heavenly embrace. And so we say, Mehera tzmiach, bring it speedily. We can't wait. Because we want to see the ultimate connection of heaven and earth. To make that connection, the most intimate connection of heaven and earth, at the very inception and creation of man, when God invested into man and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, on the day of Rosh Hashanah. We mark that day by blowing the shofar. Yom Teruah Hilachem. We have one mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah, blow the shofar. What are we blowing the shofar? It's such a significant symbolic act that's the mitzvah of the day. That's the definition of the day. I thought this is a day when we're going to be judged, when the whole world everything's hanging in the balance. It's a very critical day. It's called the day of blowing the shofar. What are we doing? We read the prayers of Rosh Hashanah. And this is exactly what we're doing. We're blowing from down here up to where it goes wide. We're giving expression to our yearning, longing, and desire that there should be a connection between the wide, the space, Hashem. Min ha-meitzar, from the meitzar of Golos, from the constraints down here. Korosika, I call out to you. Onani, answer me, b'merchavka, in your wide space, in the expanse, the limitless spiritual expanse of being connected to you. And so the shofar is our form of expression, that v'karnoi torum b'shuasecha, let your horn be lifted up, so that the whole world can realize a state of salvation, of tikkun, of connectivity, of Yeshua. It will herald the arrival of the Moshiach. What's going to happen when Moshiach comes? How's it going to be marked? Of course, we're familiar with the words of Chazal, that Moshiach will come, and Ani Reichav ala Chamor, according to one man Dama. He will be a man that will be destitute, an Ani. He will forego all the physical pleasures and desires of this world. But he won't simply forego them. He's Reichav ala Chamor. He's riding the donkey. This world is a world of chayma and of chumrius. And he masters total control over the physical. And then we have another description in Chazal that he's going to be blowing the shofar. The great shofar of Mashiach. We talk about the shofar of Mashiach. And we talk about the sound of the shofar of the Mashiach. Just like at Har Sinai, it's going to go koil. It's going to be hoylech v'chazek moed. It's going to be growing and expanding. See, when we blow the shofar, we blow. We express our shivrin lev, because we're yearning, we're crying over what we lost. We want it to be restored. But then we have at the conclusion of all our Tikiyas, we have a Tikiya Gedola. Tikiya Gedola! Woo! Then he lets it all out. Tries. It's a Tikiya Gedola. We talked about the Tikab Shofar Gadol. We're not letting go. Bringing Mashiach means giving our last ounce of energy and breath. Our lives are only meaningful when we're able to connect to you. And because we selflessly desire to connect to you with everything, therefore you will actualize that. You will give us, we're willing to give our last breath down to the very end. Just like Nachshon jumped into the sea and the water reaches his nostrils, and only then the sea splits. He's willing to give up his life. So too we blow the big shofar. There's a karnoi torum. We're lifting up that Keren. That's all we want. This is our degel. We want your Yeshua. And you know what that karnoi torum, lifting up that Keren, and our Mehera symbolizes? For your Yeshua, we're waiting all the day. And we find something very interesting here. First, we talk about the V'kanu Torum B'Shuasecha, that we want you to lift up this horn and bring Mashiach for your salvation. It will be lifted up in your salvation. And then we say, Ki lishuascha, for your Yeshua to us. We are waiting for your Yeshua. Ki lishuascha, kivinu kol hayom. It's really our salvation. And there's a very important concept here. We have the famous words of Chazal that say, if a person wants something and desires it badly, you know what the best way to get it? Find someone else that needs that so badly. And don't pray for yourself, but pray for them. Whoever prays for his friend, and he needs that very much. And nevertheless, he prays for his friend, he's answered first. And the commentaries say something very beautiful. Do you know how real, when we daven for a friend, normally we're davening for a friend, but really we're davening for a friend just so that we should also be answered, because we know these words of the sages. But one has to daven for one's friend as if we ourselves need it. When we're davening for our friend, we're doing it really as if we ourselves need it for our own salvation. Then we're answered. There's an efficacy to our prayers that is unparalleled because it's genuine. Okay. We have Hashem who created us, created the whole world, and He's restricted. The whole world, His light and His presence is concealed. It's hidden. It's unrecognized. It's almost abused, if you could say. It's solid. And all we want is Hashem's Yeshua. And then Hashem desires our Yeshua. We are ki lishuascha, for your Yeshua kivinu kol hayom. And thereby, when we think about the kvod of the Shechina and the kavod of Hashem, and we want for Hashem, we're able to accelerate the connection between heaven and earth, and we're able to bring His presence down to this world. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, Matzmiach, that sprouts forth, Keren, the horn, Yeshua of salvation. It's interesting, we don't really promote perhaps enough the desire for the coming of Moshiach. We have to yearn Moshiach. We have to say we want Moshiach now. We have to want to be able to be released from prison, from the prison of Golus, from the darkness of Golus. And if we don't realize that it's dark, that it's difficult, then it's very hard to go out. I heard something, an idea, a thought yesterday that I'll share with you, which I think is very apropos, but it tells us a little bit about the power of the times that we live in. We live in extraordinary times. It's very hard to desire Mashiach when there's everything that we could want for at our fingertips. We are so indulged as a generation. And of course, yes, everybody will each have our challenges and difficulties and things that bother us. But nevertheless, on a physical sense, there's never been a generation that has been so completely swamped with benefice and privilege. You walk down the street, you look in the store, you look in our houses, we have more than the greatest, the castles. You go to Prague, or you go to Eastern Europe, and you go to Ireland and England, you look in the castles there. We have more. You go into the ice cream store, you could choose from 100 flavors and 100 toppings. You go to the meat department, you can have there every slice of meat and chicken and lamb and beef and shish kebab that you could ever dream, that any prince could ever dream of. Every dip. You go to a restaurant, you go to the wine store. What did they have? I don't know. A little Merlot, a little... What did they have there in their wine cellars? Yeah, the wine store. It's mind-blowing. from every region, anywhere in the world. It's an opportunity. The Midrash tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, look, I foresee that there's going to be a Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, where your presence is going to reside, a beautiful, grand structure. Can you really constrict your presence just to this little, seemingly insignificant structure of a Mishkan? That was the essential thrust of Moshe Rabbeinu's question to Hashem. When we think about this question, it begs when we think about Moshe Rabbeinu's question, we ourselves have to ask a question. Hashem, does it make a difference to him if he's in the Beis HaMikdash or he's in the Mishkan? Hashem fills the entire world, the heavens and the heavens above, limitless, infinite. When he constricts his presence down here to this world, does it really make a difference if it is 500,000 square feet or it's 5,000 square feet? It's not even a fraction. It's not relevant. I heard a very beautiful idea yesterday from Rabbi Waxman, and he said, when we want to bring Hashem down to this world, we have to give away something for Hashem to come down to this world. It doesn't just come down. We have to demonstrate that we want him, that we love him, that we're willing to give away for him. The Beis HaMikdash is built on love. Toichoi rotzuf ahava. Its essence was the love of the Jewish people to Hashem. Very fascinating. To really love someone, demonstrate love. How do we demonstrate love? When there's an instinctive expression of love that flows from within, we like to give someone a kiss, a connection. It's an expression, a physical expression, but how deep is it really? Where's it backed up with real gold in the bank, with bullion? What's it mean? It's just, we're in the mood. It serves us to some degree. It's exciting. It's romantic. What does it mean for real? It only means for real if we are capable of giving away something else in order to express that affection. Affection is meaningful only when it's backed up with selflessness, with a genuine, then it becomes genuine and real. In the days of King Shlomo, the Jewish people experienced in that era an overflow of such material goodness that was unparalleled in Jewish history. The Pasuk tells us that silver and gold was not even nechshav liklum, was not even considered anything. 1,000 oilers David the Shlomo HaMelech brought. His table, the Psukim described the wealth. And it seems as if that wealth spread through the entire country. It was the economic powerhouse for that short period of the entire world. Each man was underneath his tree. The Psukim described the serenity and the security that the Jewish people had in that era. Mind-blowing. Incredible. Now, when everything is there, and everything is at one's fingertips, and nevertheless one leaves all that love and channels it to the Beis HaMikdash, to the desire, the entire year, they were waiting, the year evolved around going up to Yerushalayim and being one with the Shekhinah. It was always, the entire talk of the house was, we're going up to Yerushalayim soon. And there was 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it took to make the Aliyah L'Regel, and 3, 4 weeks going home, and then preparing for the next Aliyah L'Regel. Everything, the yearning, the craving to be one with Hashem, Lirois V'Leirois, to be able to see Hashem and be one with His Shekhinah, was incredible. It was incredible because all the goodies of the world were being foregone, were being put on the side, to channel all that love to Hashem. In the midbar, in the wilderness, They were heavenly people. They were on a very great madrega. What did they have to give up to be one with Hashem? They had any great businesses, land, agriculture, endeavors, engagement. It's a much greater expression of love when one has to give up something for it. And so when we're saying to Hashem, Hashem, we want you to bring Moshiach, we're ready to sacrifice. You know, when Moshiach comes, in all likelihood, we won't have sushi Mitsuyan around the corner. And we won't have that fantastic swizzle ice cream store around the corner. And we won't have, perhaps, our automatic ignition and our Bose 6 speakers in the car blasting forth the most incredible music. We don't know what's going to be. There's Lechte Chachre Bamidbar. We're going to go out into the wilderness. Beres Lo Zarua. But what we're saying to Hashem is, Hashem, we're willing to give everything up. We're ready to give up everything because all we want is Ritzinenu Liris Es Malkeinu. That's how we accelerate and bring about the sprouting forth of Moshiach. He's there. It's inevitable. This world is a world of tikkun, and it's inexorably moving towards the ultimate redemption. We want to speed up the redemption. We want to hear your voice. We want to understand and hear. We want to see you, Hashem. Matzmiach Keren Yeshua. You should be Matzmiach. We ask Hashem to bring forth Keren Yeshua because we desire Hashem's Yeshua, and therefore Hashem desires our Yeshua. Thank you, everybody.